Should I wait for a till it fixes? Okay. Good. Good evening, everyone. 6 o'clock, and it's. I'm going to open the meeting with our meeting this evening, Board of Trustees, August 10th, with roll call to ensure we have a quorum. Trustee Ron Wilson. Trustee Hartley McIntosh. Trustee Neil Gaynor with being represented by acting trustee Bruce Cunningham. Trustee Kyle Mays is being represented by acting trustee Don Sarich. Trustee Jan Price. Trustee Ted Staley.
Stanley here.
Ted Staley, pardon me. Trustee David Smith.
Here.
Trustee Hugh Connett.
Here.
Trustee Bob Lux is here. And that's Trustee Paul Martin. Yeah, thank you very much. How that happened. Okay. Very good. We'll begin with a invocation and a pledge of allegiance. Heavenly Father, we come to you today as an assembled body. We humbly request that you bless our meeting, our community, and our nation. Help us to work diligently, always for the common good and in the best interest of those we have been elected to represent. Guide us to be insightful and prudent in our intentions, visions, plans, deliberations, decisions, and their fulfillment. Work through us to provide a spirit of welcome to all in attendance and engage in respectful and thoughtful dialogue and discussion with wisdom, understanding, and humility. Amen. If you wish, prior to reciting the pledges of allegiance, please take an additional moment of silent prayer or reflection in the manner of your preference. Thank you. Pledge of allegiance to the United States flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Pledge of allegiance to the Texas flag. Under the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible. Thank you. We have a request for public comments. We have one requesting to speak to our board, and that is Mr. Mark Unland. Good evening, Mark.
Good afternoon, board, and appreciate the chance to speak. I have three things I'd like to make a comment on. First, I appreciate the fact that you all voted to start recording meetings. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Second, I noticed in my neighborhood that there was a drainage ditch that was cleaned out on Lake Woodlands near Shadowbed. And I thought, hey, great, we're starting to clean out some of these drainage ditches that have filled in. And I realized when he told me, well, it's probably the precinct, not the butt, because it's along the side. Which got me thinking, well, what's our program to clean out drainage ditches or any kind of systems, pipes, whatever that might be cleared, might be filled in with sediment over the 20, 30 years since it's been built. So I don't know what that answer is. I hope there's some program, and if there's some transparency that y'all can provide to explain just how do we ensure that our originally designed drainage systems are still functioning as they were originally designed. And then the third comment was I realized that there seems to be a lot of flooding / drainage activity that's going to be going on over the next couple of years. 167's got their drainage flooding prevention project. The Bear Branch Dam in Kirkendall is going to be modified. And I understand that SDRA is planning to look at the entire Bear Branch, Panther Creek watershed all the way down to Spring Creek and do a design analysis of that whole system. And it seems like this is a great time to look at the entire Woodlands drainage capacity / system as a whole. I know it's kind of fragmented by responsibilities, but honestly, in my house, I just want the water to drain, right? And this looks like a time to kind of coalesce a lot of these things together and come up with a plan or a design, or at least an assurance that we have a properly identified, designed, and maintained drainage system. We've had flooding in the past. We have millions of dollars of projects to fix all that. I'd like to be assured that if NOAA's prediction of additional rainfall in the future is true, that we have a system that's able to handle, just like we have a water system that's able to handle more people and a wastewater system that's able to handle more people. I'd like to know that the drainage system. And this looks like the time to do it, just because there's already a lot of activity.
Thank you, Mark. Arthur, you want to speak at this time?
First of all, I'd like to thank the board here. Your letter of recommendation worked. I went to the meeting, the Region H meeting on August the 3rd. The nominating committee made their report. They reported out to the full board to nominate Arthur Friedhoff to the utility district. The board voted for that, and then they asked me to sit at the meeting in the open. I thought it'd be appropriate to come tonight to give a report to the board of some of the highlights of Region H. Quite frankly, it's a big group. There's a lot going on in water planning. It's going to be, I think, a fun opportunity to serve on that board. I can bring stuff back here to the Woodlands and to the trustees and to the MUDs. And we're going to ask Shelley and Jim to help us out to distribute this to the group. Probably put it on the G drive. Houston Water Department made a presentation on water conservation, and there's some good statistics in that presentation. For example, they have 1,500 employees to run the water. It's very interesting statistics. They operate 49 groundwater plants. So you'll see in the PowerPoint, there's a lot of statistics on who they are. They also issued stage 1 voluntary water plan. So they presented that to the group, which is twice a week between 7 p.m. and 5. Think about what we have done a long time ago, was put this in place as a standard, not as a stage 1, but as a standard to conserve water. And there's more and more organizations talking about this type of plan to implement in their community as a regular practice. So we've been on the forefront of this as an organization and as a community. One other interesting item that I found in the plan is we signed a memorandum of understanding with Denmark to exchange best practices and learnings on how to reduce water loss. The city's really focused on how do they start to reduce water loss, both in home, both in their system. So there's more to come out of it. I asked the Houston representative, says, bring this back to Region H so we can share that with our respective organizations of what you're learning from Denmark. There's another thing that Denmark's on the forefront, and that's in alternate fuels and carbon neutral. They have Maersk Line, which is the second largest container carrier, is on the forefront of how to reduce carbon in fuels and in shipping. So I think this was signed last year. There's a lot more to be done, but I think this is something we should watch. And then there's something that came out of the Brazos Port Water Authority. They asked the plan to be amended, dealing with something we don't even deal with, called saltwater desalination. That was quite interesting. So there'll probably be some modifications to the 2021 plan that'll be submitted to the Texas Water Development Board. But again, this is something of a learning that we're finding out in different areas that they have uniqueness, that they have the ability to plan for that and put that in a larger regional plan to get up to the state level plan. And construction, if all goes through and they get all the permits and everything's approved, construction is slated to start in 2023 and finish maybe in 26 or 27 before this goes operational down in the Freeport area. And they're working with utilities or industrial customers like Dow to be a partner in this project. And the other thing that I thought would be interesting to share here, we're starting on the 2026 Regional H plan. We're in the early stages of gathering information. So the Texas Water Development Board's helping on a lot of gathering of information. There's also information that's drawn down from the federal government because the Agriculture Department submits surveys to anybody that has ranch land that leases it out to a leaseholder, and they have to fill out an annual form of what takes place with the land. How much do you charge? How much management time? How much acreage? So it's interesting where all the data comes from that you start to add into these plans. Our next quarterly meeting is November the 2nd, and then I'll come back to the trustees in the November meeting. We'll be talking with Jim and Shelley, maybe putting something on the G drive for Region H when there's important presentations so that the board members can, at their leisure, go out there and look at the documentation. But I can't emphasize enough, I really thank the support from this board because your letter was key to make this happen. So thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight and share some things.
Thank you, Arthur. Appreciate your service. Okay. We're now going to move to the consent agenda, items 4 and 5. Believe that
I have one observation that the in the minutes, it said the vote for the camera or recording was unanimous. They had the roll call right, but it still says it's unanimous.
Extend the meeting in the minutes. What's my decision?
It says unanimous.
Unanimous?
In this?
No, the minutes to be signed are correct.
Oh,
Okay.
They're correct.
Okay.
That's all I saw.
Thank you. Further questions, comments about the consent agenda? Hearing none. All in favor of accepting the consent agenda as submitted and modified, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Abstain? Motion yes.
I wasn't here.
So you abstain.
Yes.
Very good. Abstention. Good. Thank you, sir. Good. Okay, regular agenda. I have one comment. Thanks to Arthur's participation at Region H, we learned that we can cancel agenda item 14 because that ship has sailed. That position was filled. We hope that there's another position coming up that we can submit a suitable candidate for, but that'll be a work in progress. And thankfully, we have Arthur in place to keep us current on what's going on. So agenda item 14 has been canceled. Agenda item 6, review the draft Woodlands Water fiscal year 2023 operating and capital budgets. And that will be hosted by Jim and Maureen.
Thank you, sir. Just kind of a recap for our new trustees. I think we reported last month that this was the time of the year that we produce a draft budget that was available for your packets. I'm told that we've actually tweaked those numbers some, so you have, I think, even an updated budget in front of you tonight, an updated spreadsheet. Recap, the way the budget is developed, we first go through and we look at all the MUDs and their projected expenses, various expenses, repairs, maintenance, and then factor all of that information into the Woodlands Water Agency trustees budget. There's a category reimbursements from MUDs that relates to those different items in that category. And we have outside services. The MUDs use a combination of our and outside services to complete repairs, maintenance, and a variety of functions that are carried out in the MUDs. We get all that information together, we build it into a massive spreadsheet that Maureen has, and then we develop a draft budget for you to look at. Just a reminder, this is no action tonight, it's to start the discussion. And over the next 30 days, we'll be meeting with, again, with the budget committee. Happy to meet with any of our trustees individually or collectively, as long as it's not a quorum, to go through any questions you might have. I will tell you that we've got some, just overall, we've got about 10.3 million in revenues projected, 10.2 million in expenses. We have substantial increases this year in the employee expense category. Most of that is being driven by bringing in a executive to train with me to take over my position when I retire in December of 2023. So we factored in enough money to bring that person in during the first quarter of 2023. We've also got some additional increases in expenses this year in reoccurring operating. Maureen can go into some details on those, but it has to do with software maintenance and a variety of different categories of software that we use, our billing software, our water smart software, in those categories. We are also projecting coming in behind in our projected actual for this over what we projected last year for this year's budget. That difference is being driven by the substantial amount of legal expenses that we've incurred that were not budgeted regarding my subpoena in the federal antitrust lawsuit with SGRA, open records request, attorney general opinions, just a variety of legal expenses that were not factored in. We don't anticipate those to go forward next year, but it is impacting the projected actual for the budget this year.
And how much will that be over?
About 160,000. So with that brief introduction, I just would ask you to, you want to email some questions, email them to Maureen. If you want to sit down and go through it with any of us, we're happy to do that. And the committee will be meeting on, I think we've earmarked September the 8th to sit down and try to develop a budget that we would present to you and bring back to you next month for formal action.
This is the budget committee.
Yes, audit committee,
Audit
budget committee, same thing.
The committee has requested that any comments be in by no later than the 6th. September 6th, yes.
Are we going to discuss anything here? Or?
We may.
Yep.
Certainly.
So just if I could, you said the revision here I'm now looking at, right? It looks like it's $1 million on both sides, the revenue and expense side, right? If I'm looking just quickly, and it seems to be on the sewer line,
Yes.
sewer maintenance.
We got some revised numbers in the sewer repair that's projected to occur in a couple of our mud districts, so that increased that outside service expense to that mud and the reimbursement from that revenue item to the Woodlands Water Agency.
Was it dollar for dollar? I mean, is that what you kind of figure out if you know you're gonna have more expense, that you just then add more to the revenue line as appropriate to that to zero it out? Or
Kind of there, but as we do special projects for special muds, there's also a 10% add-on to cover our employee expenses for that. So it's not a dollar.
yeah, I read that in here. Right. So those are unidentified projects that would up to this point,
They are identified.
they change in cost.
We got for the sewer repair, the last minute last week, and I'm looking for we received some detail on where sewer repairs would occur. And these repairs are based on the analysis that we've been doing over the last year or so, trying to reduce inflow and infiltration into the mud retail system to help the wholesale, the flows that end up coming to the treatment plants during major rain events. And if we can identify areas that we can reduce or minimize our what we call inflow and infiltration, It helps lower the potential expenses at the wastewater treatment plants.
Yes. Okay. In the text you refer to as a sanitary sewer repair kind of definition and area. Is that the same thing as storm sewer repair?
No, storm sewer would be drainage primarily.
Okay.
Sanitary sewer would be wastewater coming
Wastewater.
from the homes and the business. Storm sewer would be runoff from storm events.
You say we. Who's we? We've identified, we.
It would be a consultant we have that's been working with us for the last couple of years doing smoke testing, night flow measurements, and Mike, you want to elaborate a little bit?
Televising, keeping the sewer lines, identifying. There's smoke testing and revealed some defect they would televise the sewer to see the extent of the defect. So we've done that in year one, we did the smoke testing and dive water flooding. In year two, which is this current year, we were gonna do some of the repairs that in year one that have now been pushed to year two. And so the stuff we've done this year, manhole adjustments, manhole assessments, that will be repaired in year three.
It's an ongoing, about a 3 or 4 year project to try to reduce the I&I in the retail class.
The I&I is,
Inflow and infiltration. When it rains, we see a big spike at the wastewater plant, so we know stormwater is getting into the sanitary sewer somehow, somewhere. And this is a study and an analysis to try to identify where those locations are and get them corrected.
that's some way to have a crack pipe.
Crack pipe, crack manhole.
Manhole.
Yeah.
I think I've smelled one of them.
Well,
Yeah.
you may.
And what's a phase 2 inspection related to that?
That's what we're currently doing now, manhole assessments.
That's phase.
Phase 1 was the smoke testing,
Smoke
TV.
testing.
That's
Yeah, that's
A little more in depth now. Dive water flooding, televising.
okay. Okay. Thanks.
There's also been comments from the audience about stormwater drainage maintenance.
Yeah, that's different.
Those different than this.
That's,
How do we determine, I'm sure you know, but in a casual observer, between the River Authority owns some of it, we own some of it, and Howard Hughes owns some of this. Is that a true statement? Come from the dishes?
no,
No, it's not a true statement.
no. We maintain all the road, the man-made ditches, roadside ditches are maintained by the county. The River Authority maintains the branches, their branch.
unimproved floodplain areas. Is SJRA primarily.
Are a few odds and ends down over the years, you know, where the dirt, the title was still Howard Hughes, but the districts, respective districts was maintaining those, if they were waterway conveyance channels, that's the area where the districts were maintaining, they either get easement or like they agree that a right to get rid of the property.
Jim, you mentioned the legal fees. Maybe I'm not finding it. So in the write-up says professional fees for 45,000. But we're way above that on legal fees. Are the legal fees somewhere else?
Yes.
Even though it says legal fees and other fees?
Did for legal fees that I'm referring to for subpoenas and open records requests from Lone Star and those sorts of things.
Where's that?
I categorize those under miscellaneous, so we wouldn't get them mixed up with the other fees. So if you look under consumable expenses and right above depreciation or miscellaneous expenses, and you go
26. Oh, there it
Far
is,
over.
187.
yeah, you'll see, we had budgeted 14,000 and 14,700 miscellaneous, and those truly are miscellaneous, but in my mind, to try to keep track and know where we were going with these fees. We're coding them to that category, and we're projected actual area about 180,000.
So out of that, what much of it of that is roughly related to a citizen's information request?
A very small portion.
Most of it's legal.
Most of it is dealing with the Lone Star Groundwater District open records request and the kind of the chain reaction that creates. And then the subpoena, my subpoena, and the antitrust lawsuit.
All, in essence, all related to the river qualities. So
All related to groundwater, surface water.
Additional questions, preliminary questions on the budget?
The timing of that meeting, the September 8th meeting, what time of the day?
4 o'clock, I think. is good. And that would be just with the audit committee. Let me emphasize again, any individual trustee or a group of trustees, as long as it's not a quorum, we'd be happy to sit, our staff would be happy to sit with you all or you all to go through specific questions you might have.
The audit meeting is for the audit committee.
That's right. That's where we will take your comments and incorporate those and any additional information that may develop regarding actual expenses or more projected, expenses or revenue items. We'll fine tune it, sit down with the committee and come up with a budget that we would actually recommend to this group for consideration.
And it was mentioned that any question that's submitted will be answered and it will be presented to all of the trustees.
Yes.
Is that how you prefer this to go, with submitted questions rather than what we're doing now?
Well, I think this is good to set the tone.
Okay.
No, but
Okay.
if you have specific questions which might
Yeah.
involve an in-depth response,
Mhm.
Maureen would be most happy to give you the supporting data as to how the numbers were arrived
Yeah.
at.
It's more learning for me more than anything.
Yes.
And that's why, again, I want
Yeah.
to, we're happy to sit down with you and try to have a tutorial, if you will.
He did.
Bruce, I believe you were about to speak. And
Well,
then
I had a question
Hardly.
on, which won't be answered by the audit committee. On the large street commitments, we're spending almost $500,000 on fertilizers, mowing and herbicides. And I'm just wondering, have we looked at going native on those things? I mean, if you put fertilizer down now without any rainwater, it's a waste, and the herbicide and the throwing things dangerous. So is there some way of doing a study to see if that would be feasible? And what is it, 9X is the big ditch? That
Well,
must have
we
been-
have half 1,000 acres or
11, a little over 1,100.
so, most people that manage man-made drainage ditches will tell you that fertilizing and herbiciding to allow the St. Augustine, the Bermuda grass to grow is necessary. There have been a number of in-depth presentations at the AWBD winter or summer conferences over the years that have supported that.
Yes. Harris County Flood Control, they do that, follow that procedure as well. The flood control ditches in Harris County.
Yeah, timing is important. You don't want to fertilize if you don't get any rain at some point.
We fertilize every May, April, the first morning of the calendar year. In April, we fertilize in May, and then we herbicide in November. The last morning of the calendar year, October, the herbicide in November, any of the weeds that have grown up, in the bottom of the channel and so forth. And then we mow 4 times a year. April, June, August, and
Yeah,
October.
oh, I'm familiar with the schedule now.
Trustee McIntosh, are you through, Bruce?
Yeah.
Trustee McIntosh, please.
I would recommend that look very closely at your mud budget, because this budget we're looking at today is really a consolidation of all the mud budgets, in that all the charges are eventually given to the muds. and you want to know within your own mud what the money that you're gonna have to be spending is on how many feet of sewer are gonna be replaced, how many of other things. And that's where the emphasis for study has to be. Just.
Thank you. There's no further questions. We'll move on to agenda item 7. Receive the regular monthly SJRA Woodlands Division report, including updates on wastewater strategic plan and update in infrastructure funding. Chris, Mr. Meeks, good evening.
And then I'm gonna pass it to Dan, and that's all we have for this evening. Last month, we had discussions on the drop contingency plan and how we were not close to reaching that drop contingency plan, stage 1, 2, 3, 4. I can tell you, we are still not close to percentage-wise hitting any stage. So basically, the first stage was like 70% output from a plant for 7 consecutive days. Our highest plant right now is 60% for about 3 days consecutive, and then it just kind of modestly. Overall, we're 30 to 40% capacity at any other plants together. However, long-term forecast is still showing no rain through the winter season. So it may be a little colder what it says, but we have no rain, no significant rain in the forecast. So what we're looking at doing later this month, excuse me, is moving into stage 2 of the drop contingency plan. We haven't a chance to talk to Jim just yet, but I did talk to Brian and Mike. Excuse me. Stage 2 is what you're already doing with the defined irrigation schedule because it's mandatory. So it's the odds and evens and everything else. All we're asking for is that y'all take a look and make sure it's basically being enforced, which is no different from what y'all do any other day. The other reason is because on the Lone Star permits for the Woodlands, I have 3 billion gallons that I can pump. Right now, I've already pumped that 3 billion gallons. Excuse me. So I have to go back to them and ask them for 1.5 billion gallons more to finish out the rest of the year. And so since I need to ask for more water, there's no rainfall in the forecast. Figured stage 2, which you're already doing, would be justified. Any questions? Oh, that's the other reason. So for the month of August, GRP, no, we haven't met since then. So the GRP review committee in July. Thank you. It all runs together. So in July, the GRP review committee, when we met, I explained to them that there's, long story short, there's 4.4 billion gallons that GRP can produce in a fiscal year. As of the end of June, they had 700 million gallons left. As of the time I presented in July, they had 350 million gallons left, which basically took them through July. So for the month of August, technically, we had no budgeted funds to produce any surface water. So what we talked about at the review committee is to give a couple options. We shut the plant down because we don't have the budget for it, or we reduce capacity from about 18 to 20 MGD down to a constant consecutive every day 12 MGD. So the review committee said, yep, use 12 MGD and base it up proportional from what you give every day anyways. So the Woodlands is getting about 6 million gallons a day instead of when we were getting 10 to 11 million gallons a day. So that's also part of, for the month of August, looking at stage 2 of the drop contingency plan.
So that means we pump more well water.
Pump more well water. Which is also the reason why the Lone Star permit is going to be exceeded. It's also the reason why we're looking at aquifers and lack of rainfall going forward, just to maintain the whatever we can in the aquifer levels. Yes, sir.
Chris, what is the chance of Lone Star saying no, or we're going to put a fence around you or something like that?
Well, those are, they can always say no, but I mean, it's an argument because the rules don't have any pumpage limits, you know,
They are giving more water to Continental and other places.
They are, and their rules state that if they're basically, if the board acts and says there's drought conditions, we're gonna give a temporary buffer, basically, waiver buffer, whatever it's called. They allow for an upward increase of 15% on the worst case scenario. So a 15% increase based of our 3 billion gallons is 450 million gallons. It's not gonna help us. And so we're gonna ask for the 1.5 million, then if they do the buffer for the 450 million gallons, we're just gonna kind of keep it in the back for now.
I would have to guess we're not the only ones that are going to.
Oh, no, everybody's done.
Right.
Are we having pulling water out of our wells at this point? Have we reached that stage yet?
No, we have not. Yeah, we're pulling water out of the wells, but not enough to actually cause any of the job contingency to be affected. Mostly because GRP is still sending 6 million gallons a day. And of course, rainfall like today is gonna help. So percentage wise, production wise, mechanical wise, we're fine. It's just looking forward, trying to say, okay, how long is this gonna last? And should we wait to the last minute to implement something?
You mentioned stage 2 drought,
Yes.
and we have these new water meters. I noticed looking at mine, it's pretty detailed by the day. Can you use that as an enforcement mechanism? Can you see when people are not watering odd even?
It's real evident, yeah, it's real evident. You see when the sprinkler system goes off, and that's one of the good tools of having that. People call and don't know why their bill is so high. You can tell them, it looks like every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday you're watering. Now, enforcing watering restrictions, what we would do in a case like that is maybe send one of our ambassadors by there, knock on the door, educate them about the defined irrigation plan and the schedule. Just give them a warning, assuming that they comply, then that ends there. If they don't, then we do have fines that we can assess if they violate it down the road 2, 3, 4 more times.
But we've not.
Only applies to automatic sprinklers.
Oh, yeah.
We have fines in the past.
We have issued the progressive notices,
All deals.
usually
People
to a company rather than an individual, to a commercial entity. We have found that with a little education and just some dialogue, we can get residential customers to usually comply.
Just to let you know, we're doing this later in the month so we can work with, the MUDs, next week, let all the MUDs know, but also work with Woodlands Water for any press releases, social media and all that good stuff. So it's not going to be a rush thing since it's not an emergency. There's no questions for me. I'm going to pass it over to Dan.
Mr. Hildebrand, please.
Evening, everybody. Just for the record, Dan Hildebrand, engineering manager with STRA. In your packet, and look at what page, there is a meeting summary, page 24. Meeting summary from our most recent July 27 first meeting for the wastewater strategic plan. That's STRA and working with a consultant. Not a whole lot to report tonight. Really, it was a time for us to touch base, go through, make sure we're all on the same page with the input we've gotten from the stakeholder groups and others on the alternatives. And really with the big discussion, moving forward, how are we pulling together these cost assumptions? What will they include? The life cycle cost estimating, and also looking at how we compare and contrast the alternative scoring criteria for all these alternatives too. So that was really what we're working on, the consultant working on over the next couple months here. And then we're deep into that. We've also scheduled a discussion with our financial advisors, RW Baird, start talking about some of the assumptions that go into these cost estimates, but also looking at if there's bond financing and the debt associated with that and debt payments. So just trying to pull together how we want to present all this, and it's a lot of information to pull together. That is really all I had to highlight. Is there any questions on where we're at today?
And I just had a question on page 24. The first bullet point talks about increasing to a 15 million gallons per day plant. And then in the final bullet point, it says you indicated that going to 12 MGD. Is that a typo or is that intended to be two different numbers?
So we did talk about, right now we're assuming the 10.2 MGD plant if we're building it. We did throw out the 15 MGD to plan for expansion, and what we did is really say, all right, well, that's a phase 2 analysis. So where we're pulling it back to the 6th and final accounting 2027 SFDUEs. The comment at the bottom was really associating with a sensitivity analysis on if we go from a 10 MGD plan, to say something like a 15 or a 12, does that impact the land needs? Would we still be able to fit that size of plant on what the parcels we were looking at potentially acquiring to the east of the plant? So that was a comment where, you know, if we start changing the size, is that still going to be able to fit there?
So you think that 12 is the maximum, you couldn't go to 15 on the existing property, or they've.
It was not determined. So no, not at this point, but it's something that we do need to key on further. You know, if the study goes into a phase 2, what that true capacity is that we would build with it.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah.
Agenda item number 8, receive updates on SJRA-led Spring Creek Detention Study. Dan again?
Thanks,
Or-
Dan.
okay.
I was pinch hitting for him last month.
Okay.
So again, not a whole lot to update on this one. We did cancel our August progress meeting with the funding partners and stakeholders. We do plan to hold the meeting on September 20th. The reason for canceling is we've been in discussions with TWDB, and our consultant needs a little bit more time, and we need a little bit more time with them to develop what we've been referring to as a decision matrix on the path forward for the project, what alternatives may be out there for us to evaluate further. Good news is we had the 2 dams, Birch Creek and Walnut Creek. Walnut Creek's benefit cost ratio came in very low, to where that is not looking promising at this point. Through some additional efforts the consultants have been putting in, looking at the Birch Creek one, they've done some sensitivity analysis on the volume storage at that dam to where could we reduce it. Right now they're looking potentially up to about like 25% on the volume side and still get similar impacts downstream, say here in the Woodlands or Kirkendall is one of the points of interest. So there is some promise there that we may be able to do some further tweaking on that Birch Creek Dam to get a better benefit cost ratio. So that is one of the potential paths going further. So they're looking at that a little bit to be able to present that in September, along with, do we change scope in a way to look at channelization? Do we look at Mill Creek or another tributary at some level? So that is in the process to be presented to stakeholders, funding partners, September 20th is the plan.
Dan, wasn't that Birch Creek the site that had the developer sent a letter that it was a potential development site?
They're correct. So the Walnut Creek one was primarily the solar farm.
Right.
Rice University, Todd Rice
Right.
University.
Yeah, that's,
On the Birch Creek, at the very northern part of it, there was a parcel land that would be leased to the solar farm and had a plan for some panels there. But the rest of it, over 75% of it is developer owned with I think at this point you could call it a land plan for that property. But if we could reduce it by up to 25%, there may minimize the impact on the development, potentially make it feasible.
so I'm incorrect. It was Walnut Creek, not Birch Creek, where the developer had the land that he wrote the letter about?
Primarily, we were getting letters from Rice University and the solar farm. I think, and did we get a letter at all from, we did discuss with the developer for Birch Creek, but did we get an official letter from them?
We got a letter from the attorney.
We got a letter from the attorney that basically says we're pestering our client.
And part of that was driven by our request to go on there and do environmental and geotech analysis too. So they did formally come back and say, no, we're not granting you access to the property to study.
So is it a dead issue, or is it something that's going to continue to move
Those are
forward?
definitely issues, I would say, but looking at it from a planning, is it feasible? It's something that is still on the table where we could reduce the size. Would it increase the benefit cost ratio high enough to make that potentially feasible?
Birch Creek.
Birch Creek.
Okay.
Is that because Birch Creek is small?
Woods Creek was smaller to begin with.
So you need to reduce the size.
So the 25% number I threw out there was a ballpark estimate on the volume side. That also would obviously reduce the overall footprint too. So that's what Cass Associates and their team, our consultant for the project is working on. To be able to present some sort of preliminary results at the September 20th meeting.
And on the September 20 meeting, are stakeholders in the meeting, the funding partners?
Funding partners, yes. And there's some other stakeholders involved. Any questions on that one?
Thank you, Mr. Hildebrand. Agenda item number 9, consider an act on SJRA Woodlands Division fiscal year 2023 operating budget, including wholesale water rates, water and sewer rates, pages 28 through 34 of our meeting packets.
Have anything on the budget? The budget has not changed since presented before. We did meet with the audit committee last week, I believe. So I'll be glad to answer any questions you can.
I move
Trustee
I make a motion, we approve it as submitted.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the budget as submitted. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from.
Now you have all the discussion you want.
Additional discussion? Are there any questions regarding the budget that's been submitted and reviewed prior? Hearing none?
I didn't see any cost in there for the wastewater treatment plant study. Where is that based?
The wastewater, the strategic plan is bond funded, so it's cash on hand. You'll see the debt service.
Okay, we have a meeting, we have a motion, we have a second, and
One
Yes,
comment, Mr. Chairman. I would like to point out that what you are approving or what you're voting on to approve is a change in the surface water, groundwater distribution for the Woodlands. So we previously were on 35% surface water. We're going to 50% surface water for the next fiscal year beginning September 1st, which should benefit the entire area.
thank you for reminding us of that.
That increases the cost.
Right.
There is a 5.6% cost in the GRP rate that's being assessed to us with the increased surface water.
So the projections that have enough rain, so they'll pump more groundwater. They'll come October, right?
Right.
It begins November, December,
We're
January.
paying more
Do you,
to act on subsidence, basically.
Sure, a long-term source of water as
Yeah,
well.
that's right.
you try to make it up for the end of the year, or you just forgot? Is this a
Right.
month 50/50
So what we aim for is the blend ratio of 50/50 is an annual average.
annual average?
Right, so sometimes, and we have to balance that with the Lone Star permit, so we try not to go over too much. But what we're gonna try this year, we're still running some of the projections to see if we can, is to hit a 50/50 every single month. Which in theory is good, but what I wanted to see is if we could use more surface water in the summertime rather than using more in the wintertime. So more productions in the summer, and we're gonna try to see if we can get that at that point in time. Problem is, production in the Woodlands in the summertime can hit 30-35 million. So if I do a 50/50, GRP minimum just coming to the Woodlands has to be 15 to 17 MGD. You throw everybody else in there, it's gonna blow capacity of the plant. So it probably won't be 50/50 year round, but it'll be as close to 50/50 as we can. But then winter's probably gonna be 60, maybe 70% or so.
But it is an annual goal
Annual.
and not month to month.
Not much.
Which is why if you look on the front page, the MOR, we've added in there where you see the target, which is basically 65-35 cross, and then the squiggly lines where they change every month.
So the budget, would it Would it be sufficient to cover the situation we have now with the kind of drought if we're still at 50/50? Or is,
The Woodlands should be fine. It's the GRP division I'm worried about. So GRP sets an annual amount to be pumped, produced out of the plant.
right,
And then that's, long story short, the additional revenue does help, but they have some big expenses if they hit too many MGD, basically. Woodlands division, it does kind of help a little bit because we had some operating reserve issues that we talked about during the budget where we were just about at the 2-month, if not below the 2-month reserve. Well, with all the lack of rainfall, it actually filled up those buckets. We're still behind on some R&R transfers, but lack of rainfall does help. It just stresses out people.
so you said there's some costs that come into, when you're above a certain, I guess, instantaneous or sustainable rate out of the surface water plant is,
Yes,
so that has the capacity, but is it cost? Is it replenishing the consumable cost? What kind of, is it, I'm trying to understand. What are you running up against?
So
At that
labor's
limit.
fixed, right? So if you have more pumpage, electrical is going to go up. You're going to have chemicals that go up.
Sure.
That's all generally proportional to the amount of revenue that you're going to get back in. At GRP though, they have the granulated activated carbon. And that was about 650,000, give or take. This year it's closer to 750,000. It was just bid out. That you get about 3 million gallons per day out of it before you have to change it. So GRP, if we start hitting around a 13 MGD or excuse me, about a 14 MGD, then it forces another one of these gap changes, another $750,000 expense.
That's the real problem.
Yeah.
With the GRP.
So the capacity's there. Obviously, the plant can do it, right?
Right. It's just changing out that
It's the filter.
750,000.
The plant can produce up to 30 million gallons a day. But if I do
Wow.
30 million gallons a day, then I have to have, let me see, I'm doing 12 and 4, so I gotta have 8 to 10 gap change outs. That's 750,000 a piece
Per year
per year.
So you have,
for everyone. I mean, that's
$750,000.
GRP total. Right?
Correct, across the board. But right now, it's about $2.5 million per year at 12 MGD. So at 24, theoretically, it'd be $5 million.
this is one filtration machine.
There
Is
is,
there a series?
well, I'm gonna phone a friend. How many gap changes? How many contact tubers are there? Is there 8?
Okay.
I want to say there's 8.
At times you have some shut off.
We do. Now, what we do is we rotate them, right? So you always have them full of water because they can't get dry, but we filter through certain ones. And then whenever they're basically starting to get dirty, we do some work on C when we switch to another one. So they're not all used at the same time. Now, the higher you go, if you're at 24 MGD, you have more of them.
So you say changing filter, is trying. Since
When we change them, it's kind of like a Brita filter. We have a company come in and they pull all that charcoal basically out. And then they send it off to be burned and rejuvenated and they put some new stuff in. Sometimes it's our old stuff with a little bit of new stuff. Changing out the charcoal.
And is that what's keeping us from getting more groundwater, surface water right now?
Correct.
they
So
basically,
we're gonna trade, sorry, I'm just trying to, this is kind of coming into focus a little bit. So that means we're now going to the groundwater in lieu of paying money for the surface water.
Correct. The additional expense outside of the budget of GRP.
And is that good strategy?
what's driving this is you operate in a step function. Right? It's a
Correct.
step function. So it costs you this much to, let's keep it simple, to do 100 gallons.
Correct.
And the 101st gallon jumps up here and it remains stable until you get to 200 gallon. And
Correct.
that's what's driving this. You don't want to be a little bit into the 200 gallon
Right.
range.
And it's not exactly 3 million gallons, but that's how we're able to get to 13. It actually is about 3.2, 3.3 MGD. So when you round it all together, it's about 13 MGD we can get. But if we go to 14 MGD, of course, it's another gap change out, then you might as well go to 17 million gallons. But- So it is a step.
You, maybe this will help.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand what,
If we had maintained our production through, that we had at the end of July through August, we would have had to advance a gap change in August. That's an additional 750,000 that we didn't have in the budget. The conversation I had with the
someone that's direct, someone that public works. Well, isn't it logical that if you sell more water, you get more revenue? I said, yes, if everybody's paid.
Yeah. That's
It
the
took him
issue.
a minute to understand what I'm referring to.
Yes, sir.
I was gonna add, there is a practical limit because of trihalomethane production. So that's about 50-50 is probably the practical limit.
That's-
Higher than that, than TTHM, total trihalomethane. It's more likely to exceed 80 parts per billion, which is the state limit. So
So I get, I'm sorry. I think this is really important to understand the interplay between these two assets, right? And what our overarching strategy is to come into using them. I mean, if we're just money driven, we're gonna end up in the same place with our groundwater and subsidence and all that, if we're not able to really utilize the groundwater system, so surface water system. So I understand people not paying. That makes a lot of sense. We're not recovering what's not being paid right now in the budget, right? That's still being accrued outside of what our water rate.
Correct. In the GRP budget, it's being accrued. It's about 20 million or so.
Yeah. So if everyone were paying, obviously so that gap change right now, would you
Would not be an issue at all. Because you're.
could you spread it out across all the paying customers and it would you?
Everybody was paying the current rate.
Yeah.
Based on the volume that they were using. We would not have it.
Plant production wouldn't be 12 MGD, it'd probably be 15 to 18 MGD, give or take, easy. The plant production's reduced across the entire year at a 12 MGD annual average, just to reduce the overall cost to the end user, since there are some short pays and non pays.
Interesting. Okay. All right. That helps a lot.
Further discussion?
Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome. Hearing none, we have a motion to act and approve the SJRA Woodlands Division fiscal year 2023 operating budget, including wholesale water and sewer rates. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Okay, agenda item 10, receive the attorney's report. Brian Yates.
Discuss with y'all this evening. Questions go to yellow.
Thank you, Brian. Agenda item 10, the general manager's report.
Would like to introduce John Geiger, sitting in the audience. Some of you may know and may not know, Bob Daly retires as of Friday this week. John has been hired to take on those responsibilities. And we're very happy to have John join us and happy that you're here tonight to get introduced and look forward to working with you. Other thing, we have 2 compliment emails in the packet, which is always nice to talk about those. We also have a nice email from one of our directors, how the AMI metering system helped him detect a leak. And that concludes my report.
Very good.
Question, Jim, how are you feeling?
You know what? Considering where I've been, I feel really good. Yep, I'm on a good path. It's been difficult, but doing well.
Okay, agenda item 12, receive staff or ad hoc committee updates on the following. The Finance and Audit Committee met this afternoon. I believe that that's been thoroughly discussed earlier. The Public Education Committee did not met earlier, and here's some update information from that committee. There is a survey that has been proposed to be taken before we implement a structured plan. And the information, I don't need to go through all this now at this time. That's why the reports were issued for your review. Be happy to entertain any questions if you contact me directly. Um, Being as Ron Cucci was no longer appointed as trustee, I've replaced Ron with Neil Gaynor as an added trustee on that ad hoc committee. And that completes, does everybody have a report? Is it a packet?
This education.
Yeah.
Question.
Yes, sir.
It has a group of names here.
Yes,
Is that the committee members?
yes.
Did they meet
Um,
as a group?
John, do you, Rhonda, I think that this, since this past, wasn't that, this report was generated by a subcommittee?
Yes.
Yes, so I don't recall that we formally met since the last Board of Trustees meeting. Yeah. Right.
Myself, some. And Tori.
Right.
But the group of 10, 12 names here,
Did not,
when's the last time they met?
the month before, month prior, yeah. Which is what gave the direction to undertake this, right, correct.
And we're gonna discuss this subcommittee another time.
If you care to, yeah, I mean, it's basically information, but before we proceed with anything, there'll be yes, go ahead.
That you have, just send those to Bob, or I'm more than happy to give you my card, and but you could send it to Bob, and then Bob can send it
Yeah.
out to the subcommittee. However you.
Let me recommend routing it through Shelley just for consistency purposes. That's their best.
The reason I asked is $100,000 budget proposal. As assumptions, require budgeting, 100K, and it gives an options, but.
That's not been acted upon. Yeah. It's not been, there is some in the Woodlands budget, there is some money for continuing education or customer education. It's a work in progress. Okay. Okay, agenda item 13, receive staff update on matters pertaining to implementation of automated metering infrastructure program, including status of reimbursement for drainage for system damages.
I can give you
Mike
the
Mooney,
update on
please.
the AMI. We did get most of the meters in, and we did get an installer crew back. It's just a two-man crew, so it's a little slower going, but do have a crew here that started this week. I was hoping to be done by your next week's meeting. It doesn't look like that with those two crew members, but we should be done by the end of the month, weather permitting, and this crew still gets after it. These are kind of tougher meters with roots and stuff, so it's kind of the end of the end, so it's a little slower going, and they only have 2 people. The rest of the crew is up in Conroe, working on Conroe system.
Yeah, regarding the system damages, we've been in a little bit of a pause with my health, and then our chief field guy broke his ankle in 2 places, so he's been out for a week or so. So we'll get those negotiations fired up and back going in the next week or so with TACUS.
It was not an on-the-job injury. It's gotta work.
Very good. Okay, agenda item 14 was canceled. Agenda item 15, consider authorizing Neil Gaynor, San Jacinto Regional Flood Planning Group representative, to use the Woodlands Water Agency as his affiliation on that planning group. Heretofore, he was nominated and represented the township
One water.
One Water, and since that group has no longer been funded by the township, we would like, I believe it would be in our all community best interest to authorize Neil to be the representative, showing the affiliation of the Woodlands Water Agency on that committee.
A motion to do that, Bob?
It will require a motion.
Make a motion that we appoint Neil Gaynor as the Woodland Water Agency, appointee to the region floodland.
A second.
We have a motion, we have a second, we have discussion.
So is there someone on that now, but
It's Mr. Gaynor.
Neil Gator, but he
He-
was the township representative?
That is correct.
And we had no representative,
That is correct.
so we just substituted one for.
That is correct. Yes, sir.
Was there a vacancy from this body?
No.
I mean, we just never had a representative at all.
No, we did not. This is the first opportunity for this. I mean, this flood planning group, correct me if I'm off the rails here, Mr. Shackelford. I don't believe that this group either was organized as such or.
Created earlier this year.
Yeah.
And they seeded the panel
Right.
several months ago.
And there was a good deal of work to get Dr. Gaynor on this committee because of we needed a representative. We felt they created a new position that they hadn't even thought of before, and that was the upper watershed. It was all Houston and Harris County and Fort Bend. Well, we wanted to get some representation up here, and we twisted a few arms and made some calls and did some politicking, if you will. And well, we decided Dr. Gaynor, because of his experience and knowledge, would be an ideal representative, and presented it to the One Water Task Force. They agreed. They hosted his nomination, and now they're gone. So we are now the host organization.
What does it really mean to use the WWA as his affiliation? What's really going on there? Is it just?
These organizations, both the Region H that Arthur was here earlier, they require, I don't know if it's a requirement, but they strongly recommend that an agency or an organization supports this particular candidate.
Okay.
As opposed to just an individual.
Got you. So it's us. It's okay. I understand.
If you can add.
Just a little bit of addition. On these regional planning groups, whether it's Region H for the water or the flood planning, they have certain categories that they're trying to have representatives for. So like in the case of Region H, they have utility district categories, they have municipal categories, agriculture, industry, and Neil fills the category on the Region H planning, or the Region 6 flood planning group.
Yeah, I don't have objection to Neil at all. I'm just curious how this affiliation terminology works.
That's why.
I understand.
That's why. Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. We had a second from Trustee Martin.
That's right.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain? Meeting, the motion passes. Very good. Thank you. Okay. Attorney Yates, do we have to? No closed session. Good deal there. Okay. Reconvene. Don't have to do that. Agenda item 18, discuss any matters for placement on future agendas.
And next month, we will have a closed session to review the employees that report directly to me and consider any market or salary adjustments for those that would be under executive session. And I think we'll also have an agenda item to look at modifying our vacation policy. We talked a little bit about that during the budget process. And that on the agenda as well.
Okay. If there's no further additions to agenda item 13, I move that this meeting be closed. Think there's any discussion or dissent to that?
That's it. Very much.
You.